It's actually an absolute delight to be having this conversation with you today. It's been a long time since we managed to do an in-person meeting, and it's an additional privilege to be doing this in-person event today with our Vice President for Studies, Dr. Marwan Maasher, who's also the former Deputy Prime Minister and former Foreign Minister of Jordan. Dr. Maasher, on, I think it was Tuesday, the Arab Plan for Gaza was launched. This comes on the heels of a plan that was proposed by President Trump to turn Gaza into a Riviera. There was a lot of pushback from Arab countries around this plan or this suggestion. The idea being that many of the Palestinians in Gaza today would be either moved to Egypt or to Jordan. But this also comes on the heels of a year and a half of the most horrific onslaught on Gaza that we have seen in recent history, that has left upwards of 46,000 dead. And this is the official number, but unofficially, we understand that many more are unfortunately still under the rubble. Close to 19,000 children orphaned. I mean, the numbers are horrific, so I will not go into them. But the quasi-destruction of almost 80 to 90% of Gaza itself. At the same time, we've seen a lack of unity amongst Arab countries in trying to propose what a post-Gaza conflict could look like. The plan was launched at an Arab summit. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is in this plan, or maybe more importantly, what is not in this plan, and who was at the summit and who was missing?
Thank you, Maha. It's a pleasure to be back to have in-person meetings at Carnegie. It's been truly a long time. I will go into just some details about the plan because by now you know it all. I think what's more important is to highlight what I think are elements in the plan that are worth looking at, and what is not in the plan also is worth looking at. But the technical details is something you probably know. $53 billion to be spent in 5 years. Reconstruction of Gaza through a number of phases. The most important element, of course, is that Palestinians will stay in Gaza and reconstruction will take place in phases around the strip. But let me talk about also what is in the plan that has not got attention from the Americans or the Israelis or the international community for that matter. We have two suggestions now on the table. We have an American suggestion, as we said. It's not a plan, it's a suggestion. It has no details. It talks about 2 million Palestinians leaving Gaza and never returning. It doesn't talk about how they are supposed to leave Gaza and never return. What is the mechanism of doing that? When the Palestinians themselves do not want to leave, when Egypt and Jordan have closed their borders and repeatedly said they will not leave. So that's the suggestion. And then you have a plan, which we can talk about. The technical details are plenty. The plan is 91 pages, so it goes into a lot of technical details with maps, with specifics regarding, for example, how many schools, how many mosques, how many churches, how many hospitals in each sector that is to be reconstructed. So very detailed. But what's more important also to emphasize is that the plan talks about a political crisis. It doesn't suffice at reconstructing Gaza. it talks about the need to end the conflict, and that without ending the conflict, it's going to be very difficult to talk about the more problematic issues regarding, for example, the disarming of Hamas. The plan does talk about disarming of Hamas, but in the context of if there is a political horizon and a clear agreement to have a peaceful agreement, then one can talk about disarming Hamas. Without such a horizon, it's very difficult to, according to the plan, I'm still talking about the plan. It's very difficult. Who is going to disarm Hamas? A year and a half of bombing did not disarm Hamas. How are you going to do it, particularly in the absence of a political horizon? The plan also talked about the West Bank and Gaza as one unit, which is also uh, that Gaza is not to be seen in isolation of the West Bank, that the two constitute one unit. And the plan, for the first time, criticizes the Palestinian Authority very clearly. The diplomatic language used does not hide the fact that for the first time maybe in Arab history, that there is criticism of the Palestinian Authority. Because I think the Arab world understands that if Hamas is not to govern Gaza, it seems that agreement has been reached on that Hamas is going to have any say in governing Gaza. That also the Palestinian Authority, and the plan talks about the need for the Palestinian Authority to have serious reform. And the plan implicitly says that serious reform is not appointing DPP to Abu Mazen. The plan explicitly calls for presidential and legislative elections to be held in 1 year, and it talks about elections to be held for both the Palestinian Authority but also for the PLO, which is also a new element. Uh, that does not mean that this is all going to take place, but I just thought I would highlight parts of the plan. I think that are important. It's very uh, interesting to see that the American and Israeli response, which we can talk about now, did not mention the political horizon at all, did not even comment on whether they agree, disagree, no comment on the political horizon. Their criticism of the plan was simply limited to the reconstruction of Gaza, without any mention of any political horizon beyond. Uh, beyond.
I think also the rejection of the plan, I mean, the excuse that they constantly are using is the question of the disarmament of Hamas as a as a a kind of a conditionality that is being put on the table. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this. But I think also beyond this conditionality, is there Arab consensus around this plan? I mean, is this something that Arab countries can actually, and maybe by extension through the OIC, broader Islamic countries, is this something that can be pushed forward
Certainly, the
realistically?
disarming of Hamas is the principal obstacle, probably, and uh, uh, clearly there are differences in how different Arab countries view this. The Saudis and the Emiratis did not attend the summit. I'm not suggesting that this is because of this issue, but reports are that there are disagreements over the plan. But the disagreements did not prevent the plan from being announced, and it did not also uh, 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 prevent the convening of another summit in Riyadh next week for Islamic countries, and it's taking place in Riyadh. So certainly these agreements so far have not prevented the plan from being announced. Now let's look at the Israeli and the American response. The American response is interesting. I mean, Mr. Trump has this habit of giving an initial response and then going back and looking at it in detail. So the initial American response was outright rejection. Yesterday, Steve Witkoff said the plan has positive elements and we are studying it. That's a different reaction than the Israelis, in my view, are not interested in anything. No matter how good or bad it is, the Israelis are not interested in the reconstruction of Gaza because the reconstruction of Gaza is going to mean the staying of Palestinians on their land. And this is clearly against Israeli interests. The Israeli interest is in mass transfer. It has become very clear. They are not having it themselves. Mass transfer of Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt and from the West Bank to Jordan. We will talk about the West Bank in a minute. And so I think the Israeli response is very predictable. No matter how good the plan is, the Israelis are not going to accept it. And the Israelis will not accept a political horizon either. Netanyahu has publicly said that a two-state solution is a reward for terrorism. The Israeli Knesset passed a law in July that stands against the establishment of a two-state solution, a law that was approved by every single Israeli party except Arabs. So there is consensus in Israel on no Palestinian state. The Americans are, Trump has shown a tendency for transactional activities. It's not clear whether the Americans will end up, dealing with the plan. And there's a lot of work to be done. We have a group of Arab foreign ministers that will travel to Washington and try to talk to the administration about this. But let me make a point clear. Sorry. If the plan is not accepted or modified in any way, what is the alternative? There is no alternative. To talk about the alternative being the American plan, there is no American plan. And there is no American suggestion that has any teeth of being implemented. So the alternative to rejecting the plan or modifying it in whatever way, the alternative is the continuation of the status quo, in my view. And that's what's really of concern.
We'll get to the status quo in a second because it's not just about Gaza and the continued horror there, but also about the West Bank. But before we do that, I wanted to also ask you about press reports now that there is a direct communication between Hamas and the US administration. There are even hints in the press that Israel, I mean, it was Israel that leaked news about this conversation because they are worried about being a deal being reached with them out of the picture somehow. Which sounds a bit far fetched to me, but
Look,
I'd put it on the table.
look, the Israelis' objective is clear. They do not want to go beyond phase one of the ceasefire. Going beyond phase one means the fall of the Israeli government. It's very clear. And therefore, the Israelis are not going to approve of any effort to go beyond phase one by the Americans or by anybody else. They want to control the game. They want to control what, give the impression that they are negotiating, but in fact, there is no, in my view, there is no intention whatsoever of Netanyahu going beyond phase one. The Americans here are different. That doesn't mean that the Americans are not supporting Israel. They are. But Trump is interested in phase one because he wants to be seen as a peacemaker, even if that comes at the expense of the Palestinians. That's fine with him, but he still wants to show that he is controlling, he is calling the shots, and he is capable, just as he was capable of bringing about a ceasefire, that he is capable of going beyond.
But talking about President Trump, I mean, he has his eye on the Nobel Prize, which creates a challenge for him. I mean, on the one hand, he wants to be the man who brought peace to the Middle East and beyond. At the same time, some of his biggest donors are, including Miriam Adelson, are very much uh, pushing the notion of annexation of the West Bank, the expansion of settlements. So there's a conundrum here in a sense. I mean, what we've been seeing, the horror we've been seeing in which predates October 7th, the increasing settler activity, uh, attacks against Palestinians, the displacement actually of Palestinian communities within the West Bank, recently the attacks against a number of refugee camps. I mean, the numbers are, I think it's 40,000 people who've now been displaced within the West Bank. So, how do you see him squaring this circle of wanting a Nobel Prize and yet at the same time endorsing and supporting activities that will make that prize even more elusive? Mind you, just as a bracket, also large amounts of arms also now being delivered to Israel, including 7,000-ton bombs, which previous administrations had refused to hand over to Israel.
Well, the short answer is with great difficulty. I don't know how he's going to square the circle on this. And there is another factor beyond what you have mentioned, Maha. It is true that he wants to be a pacemaker and a peacemaker, and you know, I'll leave it to others to judge whether he wants to Nobel Peace Prize or not. But he certainly wants to be seen
Maybe
as a
pacemaker.
peacemaker. But there is another factor, which is he wants a deal with Saudi Arabia. He badly wants a deal with Saudi Arabia. Let's remember the talks with Saudis started in his first term. Mr. Biden picked up the talks, but it started actually during Trump's first term. Now the Saudis are in a dilemma. On one hand, they do want a lot of things from the United States, not from Israel, but they understand that the route to get these things is through peace with Israel. But really, what they want is a defense treaty which requires the approval of two-thirds of the Senate. They want a peaceful nuclear program, and they want advanced weaponry. But during the Biden administration, what the Saudis told the Israelis and the Americans is we are not, particularly after October 7, we cannot agree, we cannot arrive at a peace agreement if it doesn't have something serious on the peace process. And what the Saudis were asking for was a commitment, even if it was nominal, a commitment to a pathway that would lead to a two-state solution, to be explicitly included in any deal, in any normalization deal. The Israelis said no. The Israelis said we are not ready to even nominally commit to a two-state solution. That is first against what we want, and two, it will result in the fall of the. Today, the situation has become even more complicated. We are no longer talking about a pathway to a two-state solution. We are talking about annexation today, annexation of part or all of the West Bank. And the Americans so far have not made their position clear on annexation. Uh, said that he will do so probably in the next few days. But if Trump goes ahead and in any way approves the annexation of part or all of the West Bank, I don't understand how is that going to help his other objective of arriving at this agreement between the Israelis and the Saudis. The real problem here is not just Gaza, it's the West Bank. So it's what's happening in the West Bank, not just Gaza. And what's happening in the West Bank, as you said, Maya, it really troubles. You have said basically engaged in ethnic cleansing in Area C, at least in Area C, in the West Bank, sectors that are supported by the Israeli. You have the Israeli army going into major Palestinian camps. You have a clear attempt to concentrate Palestinians in major Palestinian cities, Area A, which is only 18% of the West Bank, probably as a a first step towards annexation of at least Area C. Area C, to remind us all, is 60% of the West Bank, and it's basically the Jordan Valley. So, as you said, 2,000 Palestinians have already been evicted from areas. And what many people think is that the plan is to annex at least areas, as Mr. Smotrich has publicly declared, to annex the land. But of course, Israel doesn't want to annex the people. Annex the people is very problematic. So they want to annex the land and somehow, either transfer people outside or ask Jordan to administer the people that they don't want. It's a it sounds very bizarre, but it's exactly what the Israelis are trying to do, in my view, in the next phase.
Can you maybe say a few words about Jordan and Egypt in this context and what their positions are, what are the challenges they're facing, how they're going about dealing with this beyond the Arab plan, obviously.
So, so in principle, the positions are the same, but there are differences in the condition of both countries. Egypt is a country of 110 million, faced with the prospect of, let's say, if even all the Palestinians leave Gaza, for the prospect of 2 million Palestinians in Sinai. Egypt doesn't want, any opening of the border. But in the end, the transfer of 2 million Palestinians, security issue for Egypt, but it stops at that 2 million, 110 million, is something that is manageable. Now, if Jordan, 1.5 million in accepting, I mean, I'm of course might be dramatizing, but just to look at the number, 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank. Even if half a million end up in Jordan, 7.5 million Jordanians, that is going to pose not an economic and security threat only, but an identity issue for sure. And as you know, I mean, you are the first to know in Lebanon about identity issues. So for Jordan, it's something that is inconceivable, and it is not subject to pressure. So at the a few weeks ago, people said that Trump used the aid card as a threat to Jordan. He has since said he will not use it. But even if the United States uses the aid card, when you for official Jordan, when you put the aid card on one hand and put what official Jordan sees as a potential threat on the other hand, the choice is clear. No amount of pressure is going to get Jordan to accept that. There are also indications today that Gulf states are ready to pay the bill, to pick up the bill, in case the United States does indeed cut off aid. But as I said, the aid card is not one that is of great importance to a country like Jordan, which sees the annexation uh, as as a different threat, but also sees the annexation as trying to solve the Palestinian issue at its own expense, empty Palestinian land of its citizens, and help Israel establish a state, a Jewish state, on all of historic Palestine.
On this note, are we looking at an expansionist Israel today? I mean, it's not just the West Bank. Israel today is occupying close to 600 square kilometers in Syria. Here in Lebanon, it continues to occupy 5 hilltops within Lebanese territory. Um, and there doesn't seem to be any pullback at this point. On the contrary, we're seeing it trying to, roadway to the Druze community in Syria, trying to establish relationships. Are we looking at expansionist Israel today? An Israel which has no defined borders, least within its constitution.
I mean, Israel has always had expansionist
Constitution.
policies.
Yeah.
The difference today is that these policies are being supported by the constituent state. That's giving Israel basically a carte blanche to do what it wants. And I agree with you, Maha. What's happening in Gaza is only part of a regional attempt by Israel to dominate. What's happening in Syria is extremely concerning. Israel is basically trying to divide Syria. Israel is already publicly talking about a federal arrangement in Syria, talking about a Druze concerning what is taking place. And as I said, in the absence of anyone to put, it's going to be a real problem dealing with this is with the U.S. administration so far has not checked Israeli expansionist policy.
The statement that came out of the Arab Summit also in Lebanon, was saying that it came in the context of where there's an Arab plan for Gaza, but there was can you talk to us a little bit about possibly the background for this and this political impulse across the region to demilitarize and demobilize
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the motive mentioning. But I'm glad that some. I mean, I think I'm the last to talk about Lebanon. So many esteemed members of the audience, but we are witnessing an opening in Lebanon, a moment of hope. Uh, it doesn't mean that Lebanon's problems will be solved just because we have a new, forward-looking government, but at least it is offering, I think, a moment of hope for many, if not most Lebanese. That finally, at least, there is a government that is serious, that is clean, and that means business in terms of helping, helping the international community help Lebanon. It remains to be seen. We 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 uh, we cannot be maybe overly hopeful, but at the same time, I think I think the region deserves to be at least hopeful that that things are on the right track after decades of domination by one political party.
talking about things being on the right track, would you be able to comment, maybe say a few words about what we've seen unfolding in Syria? I mean, it's been a dramatic period since the fall of Bashar al-Assad on December 8th, and what has followed since then. It's a moment of hope, but a moment of considerable questions, particularly in light of what happened yesterday with the fighting that's broken out now in Ladi and Tartus and other places.
In mathematics, I have a background in mathematics. To solve a problem, you need to satisfy necessary and sufficient conditions. The fall of the Assad regime is a necessary condition towards a better Syria, in my view, but it's not a sufficient one. For uh, Syria to be prosperous, the new regime has to learn from the mistakes of the old regime, not just in Syria, but across the Arab world. The new regime has to move towards inclusionist policies. It has no chance of survival if it wants to rule Syria in an exclusive manner, if it wants to impose its own cultural ideas on the rest of society, if it doesn't include the Alawites and the Druze and the Kurds and the women and the Christians and all components of Syrian society. And that remains to be seen. We don't know yet whether, I mean, at least I don't know whether the regime is serious or not. The rhetoric is great, but the actions are not particularly following what the rhetoric is. And so I again think this is a moment of hope, but it's not sufficient yet. We need to, and the international community can play a role here. Uh, we need to engage with the new Syrian regime as an international community. But I don't think we need to engage with it in an unconditional manner. The Syrian regime also has to deliver on many aspects if it wants the help of the international community. And frankly, without the international community, sanctions are not going to be lifted. Syria is not going to- This is not going to take place. So this is a regime that needs the international community. Does it understand enough that it needs the international community, and in order to get the help it wants, it needs to be engaged in inclusive policies? I honestly can't tell at this stage. But Maha, if you allow me, I want to make 2 points on Syria. Syria has, the fall of the Assad regime has given us two lessons, which the region keeps ignoring. One, the Arab Spring is not over. We have been told by Arab regimes in the region after 2013 that the Arab regime is over, that the Arab regime was a winter, that the Arab regime did not result in success, and therefore it is better to go back to the policies of the old regimes without addressing the problems that led to the Arab regime in the first place. We saw a second wave in 2019. Lebanon was part of it. Iraq, Algeria, Sudan. It also did not succeed. The old regimes were just too strong. And Syria, to me, is a third wave. And we're going to see successive waves so long as the problems that led to the Arab Spring are not addressed. We're going to keep seeing successive waves. Is this a lesson that Arab regimes are heeding? I'll leave the answer to you. And the second lesson, in my view, is no amount of brutality can ensure long-term stability. One can argue that the Syrian regime is among the most brutal, the old regime was among the most brutal, not in the region, but throughout the world. And yet it did not prevent its fall in the end. And so real stability comes from addressing people's problems. It doesn't come from brute force, which can slow down the process of change, but it cannot prevent it.
Let me ask you one final question, since we're talking about a kind of a historical context before I open it up to the audience. Would you also consider the fall of the Assad regime as coming in the wake of an October 7th moment, i.e., October 7th is perhaps, we're now beginning to understand in some ways the extent to which it's really upturned politics across the region. It's been a series of black swans the past year and a half in some ways. Would the fall of the Assad regime have happened irrespective?
Look, there are many reasons that contributed to the fall of the regime. October 7 is certainly one of them. The weakening of Hezbollah is certainly one of them. The war in the Ukraine is simplistically say that I'm saying is there will come conditions that would result in the fall of the regime if the regime continues to ignore people's problems. Whether these conditions are October 7, the Ukraine, or what have you, if if people allowed the regime to fall, there must be a reason for it. In the end, the Syrian army did not defend Damascus. There's a reason for that. And so that's what I'm saying. But did October 7 contribute? Absolutely.
I'll open it up now for questions. Sami,
I mean, two
and then
quick
Ali.
questions. First, how much Saudi Arabia is committed to the two-state solution and with East Jerusalem as
لحظة
capital?
سامي عم بيجيبوا لك مايك بس.
We are being live streamed also, so it's please.
So, how much Saudi Arabia is committed to the two-state solution with East Jerusalem as capital? This is one. Second, if you can give us some words on the nuclear issue with Iran and how this is related to the current stalemate, if Israel is using this stalemate for more leverage to pressure the Palestinians.
Look, I can't answer the question on behalf of the Saudis, but I can tell you this. There is no question in my mind that the Saudi position regarding normalization with Israel has hardened since October 7. Whether you talk to Saudis, it's clear in their own view, they cannot sign without something serious on the peace front. It's pure interest. There is another factor which is not talked about, which is the defense treaty with the United States. The defense treaty requires two-thirds of the Senate approval. Yeah, 57. During the Biden administration, Biden argued that he could bring all the Democratic senators. uh, The Democratic senators, some of them at least, during the Biden administration said, we are not ready to commit our children to defend Saudi Arabia unless there is something serious on the peace process. Without that, we are not ready. So even then, during the Biden administration, approval by the Senate of the defense treaty is questionable. Today, in my view, it's not questionable. It is impossible. Today, you have 54 Republicans in the Senate. Let's assume that all of them will vote for the treaty. You still have Democratic senators to convince. You don't have them. One, because Democratic senators are not going to give this gift to Trump, and two, because they also need something very serious, even more serious than before, on the peace front. These conditions are not there. Therefore, the Saudis understand this. They know their chances have become even weaker at arriving at a peace settlement. And that is why they insist. Now, you tell me about the details, I don't know. Do they, that's not up to me to decide. On Iran, conditions have changed. The Saudis, when they were talking about an agreement with the United States before, wanted a defense, wanted protection against Iran, basically. Today, the Saudi Iranian relationship is not great, but it's far better than it used to be. Today, they are talking about, they're talking to each other. And so the Iranian threat to Saudi Arabia today has, can subsided is not the right word, weakened. It's not the same threat that existed before. And I think the Saudis are looking at the Iranian relationship in a different light than they were a few years ago.
I mean, we've actually even heard talk directly from Saudi officials who consider the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran as having protected Saudi Arabia, and I think they see very much themselves today as possible mediators, not just between Iran and not just between Russia and the US over Ukraine, but also possibly between Iran and the US. I mean, these are things. The Saudi position, I mean, has definitely changed in that respect. Salim and then Alia.
I'd like to follow on the point that was raised by Maha. You briefly mentioned the impact of the war on Ukraine on our region. Could you elaborate more on the changes that we're going through in our region based on the debates, the negotiations that we're observing around the war between Ukraine and Russia, Europe and the US? How would this affect us?
I mean, I mentioned it, Salim, only to point out that the Syrian regime, the old Syrian regime, was there because of the support of two countries, basically Russia and Iran. And once attention for Russia was diverted elsewhere in the Ukraine, and once Hezbollah was weakened, and Iran was weakened also, not just Hezbollah, after October 7, that created an opening. The fall of the Assad regime didn't happen overnight. Obviously, HTS and others were training for this for 10 years, maybe. So it did not just come out of the blue. What developed was a combination of factors. Ukraine, the weakening of Hezbollah, the weak state that Syria was in. The Syrian soldier was getting $15 a month. This is not a condition that allows for a protection of the regime. So it's just a congruence of a number of factors that affected Russia's position.
Thank you, Dr. Masher. I want to ask you about who's going to foot the bill. Basically, I mean, within the new Trumpian world, there is an the UAE and Saudi position on the role of Hamas, sort of more moderate in managing Gaza?
I mean, the short answer, Alia, is it's not clear who's going to foot the bill. Frankly, if I want to be more candid, it's not clear who's going to foot the bill in Syria also. It's not clear who's going to foot the bill in Lebanon. Okay? The president to come back with a financial package. Things are not that easy anymore. Okay? They're not, the age of unrestricted foreign aid by Gulf states is over. So it's not clear who's going to foot the bill. The plan talks about a
50 million.
donor conference to bring funds that is supposedly going to take place in 1 month in April. But is the conference going to come up with 53 billion or even anything close to that? Very highly doubtful. So it's a very legitimate question. Certainly, the American nobody is willing to foot the bill to reconstruct Gaza only to see it being bombed again. And it has being met. Even if all the countries agree to the plan, the question of who's going to foot the bill will not be satisfactorily answered. It's a clear problem. I mean, a lot of people argue, and I think justifiably, that what we are likely to see is a continuation of the status quo. It's no reconstruction because the conditions don't seem to be there.
I think the question of no reconstruction is one that's haunting all of the countries. I mean, this includes Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Libya. The possibility of billion for the plan is also just not there,
Yes.
at least for phase one.
Thank you. And everyone. What is really preventing right now a united position from the and alignment?
I think the last time we saw consensus in the Arab world over maybe any issue was in Lebanon with the Arab Peace Initiative. That was 23 years then. We have not been able to talk about an Arab world. There are different Arab worlds, different interests, etc. And October 7 did not result in a unified Arab world either. The Trump plan, in my view, offered some hope that a unified position might come out, precisely because all Arabs today, or most Arabs, feel threatened. Feel threatened by an American administration which is extremely aggressive, which is giving Israel a green light to do what it wants, etc. The question becomes, while they are while they feel threatened, they still have different interests regarding who's going to rule Gaza after Hamas. What is the threat going to be of such a serious nature that Arab states will be willing to put their differences aside in the face of a common threat, or will they continue to have their interests, dominate any feeling of being threatened? I mean, I don't know. I can't answer. The Arab states, the Arab world has not shown a tendency so far, has not shown a tendency to take unified positions, serious unified positions in recent times. Will they do so today? I really don't know. The differences are there. It's clear. It is also clear that so far, at least, they have nominally accepted the plan, even with the differences. But of course, the devil is in the details. Yeah.
I mean, like something like annexation and transfer of Palestinians from West Bank to Jordan, causing national security, major national security issue of Saudi Arabia. Wouldn't be this
Yes.
enough of a reason?
Again, I hope so. I hope. I am of the view that they understand the seriousness of the threat. I am of that view. Yes, but do they, like I said, will that? I can't answer at this stage. I'm not as sure as we all need to be.
Even in the context of the global alliance that for the two-state solution that the Saudi
Look,
Arabia. And it's being led by Saudi Arabia.
this is a side issue,
Yeah,
but what are the chances today of a two-state solution?
negligible.
The two-state solution has become a slogan that the international community raises, without pairing it with a plan, with a credible plan to implement it. So Israel keeps building more settlements and making such a solution impossible, while the international community suffices with support for it. That has become meaningless. Meaningless. So again, that's a personal view. I understand why the international community does not want to acknowledge publicly what they already know privately, which is that a two-state solution has become impossible. Nobody wants to acknowledge it publicly, because acknowledging it publicly will force them to state the alternative. They don't want to state the alternative. The alternative is very problematic to them as well. But again, maybe that's the subject of another conversation. I think Bashar was.
Bashar,
Hi,
yeah,
thank you, Mr.
Bashar,
Marwan,
and
for
then
that. I have two things that I'd like to hear your thoughts about. One is something you've talked about, which is in the wake of the Israeli actions in the region, we have two places in Syria. While the things in the Palestinian side look very gloomy after the Israeli actions. So they have kind of, that same action has different impacts, radically different impacts on two different places. So is there a deeper reason why the Israeli action brought hope to Lebanon, not intentionally, but at least advertently, and hope to Syria, but gloom and sadness to and no horizon? That's, I think, is there a, how come this power has played different roles or has different impacts? The second one, before I, is on the Palestinian issue. I mean, I agree with you. There is an impasse towards the Palestinian two-state solution. It's not, can be seen at this stage. But also, the transfer plan is also impossible to be impossible. It couldn't have happened. It could, the Israel could not make it succeed even under heavy bombardment. It's very difficult to see it be successful in Gaza or the West Bank under less severe conditions. Isn't there a horizon, not a horizon that is fair for the Palestinians, not a horizon for the two-state solution, but a horizon for a governance of Gaza sponsored by Arab states, where Hamas does not play a role, at least not the same role, not has a military arm. Also, a governance in the West Bank with the help of Jordan, that would allow Israel to annex a lot of stuff, including all the stuff later on by the Saudis and by the Egyptians and others, as a the most we can get at this stage. And that would be the political horizon, not a two-state solution, eliminating Hamas, annexing the things that Israelis would like to annex, not maybe all what Smotrich want to annex, but some of it at least to satisfy his, keeping the government. Isn't that a kind of a possible outcome, maybe undesirable, but the only possible outcome, given the impossibility of two-state solution and the possibility of a transfer as well?
You raised two important questions, Bashar. There's a fundamental difference between Hezbollah and Hamas and how Israel views them. Israel wants the West Bank. It doesn't want Gaza. It wants the West Bank, all of the West Bank. And so its objective is not the weakening of Hamas. That's only a partial objective. Its objective is to take over the West Bank. The West Bank is, with this ideological government, means it's not a security issue for Israel. It's an ideological issue. The whole land belongs to Israel, according to them. And that is why the two cases are different. The weakening of Hamas, the disarming of Hamas is not going to lead Israel to say, now I'm ready to negotiate over a two-state solution. It's not going to do that. So that objective is different from the objective in Hezbollah. I agree with you that mass transfer is difficult. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's difficult. 6.5 million Syrians left Syria in the wake of the Syrian civil war in 2011. So it's not impossible. 6 million Ukrainians left Ukraine. It's not impossible. But I agree, it's difficult. Now, there are two outcomes. If, let's suppose that that Israel does not succeed at mass transfer, as you said, and let's suppose that a two-state solution does not come about, as I think we both agree. You present one alternative, which is what Israel is working at. But there is another alternative in my view. The one alternative you talked about is exactly what was in the Trump plan, which he called the deal of the century, which he doesn't now think is enough for Israel. Okay, what did the deal of the century envision? That all of the settlement land, all of the Jordan Valley, and of course Jerusalem, are immediately annexed to Israel before negotiations start. So he takes 30 to 35% of the West Bank immediately. And negotiations take place over the rest, which, if successful, will result in what you said, a Bantustan type of an arrangement. Another alternative. Call it utopic, call it utopian. I mean, but I think to me, I think it's a viable alternative, which is that today the number of Palestinians living under Israel's control are greater in number than the number of Israeli Jews. Today, you have 7.5 million Palestinians to 7.2 million Israeli Jews. Out of the 7.5, 2 million have Israeli citizenship and 5.5 are under occupation. If a two-state solution does not come about, as I agree with, then the international community will have to deal not with occupation, which is problematic, but with apartheid, which is more problematic. How far, how long can the international community agree to an apartheid-like situation 20 years down the road is an open question. I don't think the answer is a straight, yeah, they will agree, they will. I don't think it's a straight one. Two, there is a generational gap today, clearly in the world. The younger you are in age, the more likely you are to criticize Israel or to support Palestinians. We're seeing it. What about a generation from today when these people assume positions of power? Today, I was looking at a poll today, okay? 59% of Democrats in the United States today favor the Palestinians over Israel. 59%, not the whole society, the Democrats. 41% of the Republicans want a two-state solution. So clearly, with time, things are changing. Then there is a third route, which we don't talk about often, and I understand why, which is the legal route. For Arabs, the legal discourse is not important because all UN resolutions have not done anything to reverse the occupation. So when people talk about the legal route, nobody gives attention. But there is another legal route that is developing through the international courts, International Court of Justice and the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Because these decisions by these courts are mandatory, are binding which is different than the UN resolutions, all taken under Chapter 6, which are not binding. It is not enough for Israel to agree, of course. And Israel will continue in the short term, will continue not to abide by the decisions of these courts. But what happens again in a generation's time? These decisions, mind you, are not binding on Israel. They're binding on every country that has signed the ICC. The European Union created the ICC. Are they going to now stand against it? So all I'm saying is there is another scenario, but it's going to take a generation. And I'm not saying this scenario is necessarily going to be the one, but all I'm saying is there are alternatives other than, a stump of a state which is not viable.
Thank you, Marwan. We have two more questions. The gentleman there, and then His Excellency the Ambassador to Belgium.
Okay, Jad Yatim, a journalist. What we can notice, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there are two American approaches in the region. One is led by Trump administration, and it's very aggressive in Gaza, also in the West Bank, and we can say the same in Iran. And it's putting pressure on Egypt, on Jordan, and also on Saudi Arabia. The other one is a Pentagon approach, and we can see it clearly in Syria, a very autopilot approach. And this is what's preventing the new regime from delivering. The negotiations with the SDF are just like tackled. They can do nothing with the Druze, with the Israeli threats. In Lebanon, we are exactly under CENTCOM with General Jaspers. It's somehow an autopilot, but like in all the cases, we can see that both approaches are risking to destabilize countries that are allies to the US or allies to be. So why do you think, first, the administration or the United States is risking that? My second question is that in our world that we are witnessing that state superpowers or regional powers are trying to impose their diplomatic agenda with military. We can see this with the Iran proxy wars, with Russia directly in Syria, directly in Ukraine, or also with the Fifth Corps in Syria, and elsewhere. So do you think, especially that the Gaza plan that was approved in Cairo summit, it has its deficit from within. They don't talk about direct funds, like about conferences to collect the funds, and will take so long. The second thing, Hamas is...
Can you
Okay.
please?
Hamas is not agreeing on that. So do you think that the Arabs can still impose their diplomatic agenda without having a different defense strategy or different defense policy? And do you think there is a possibility for a rise for a Jordanian, Egyptian, Saudi alliance in the region? Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a clear reason why the American approach to Syria is different than the American approach to Palestine, which is that, and we don't like to hear this in the Arab world, the Arab world, the region, is no longer of strategic priority to the United States. Okay, what happens in Syria is not that important to them. What happened in Iraq is not that important to them. This is a different United States than the one that invaded Iraq in 2003. In fact, the invasion itself led to a rise of a public opinion in the United States that is against any foreign military intervention. And therefore, whether it is Biden or Trump, on Syria or on the region in general, the interest is limited to maybe the prevention of the development of ISIS again or things like that. But Syria itself is not of strategic interest. And that explains why the United States today is taking a very hard-line position against the new Syrian regime. We are not ready to deal with the new Syrian regime unless they get rid of all the foreign nationals. They come up with an inclusive government. There's a list of conditions that are very difficult to be met beforehand. What the Syrian regime is saying is, okay, to the international community, give me at least some partial lifting of the sanctions so I can give my people, things they can feel are different. Syrians today enjoy 1 hour of electricity every, as you know, I mean, you guys know the situation better than me. So the United States approach to Syria is very hardline only because they don't care. They just don't care. What was your second question? So whether look, there is an Egyptian Jordanian Saudi axis developing. Okay, the last time it developed was during the Arab Peace Initiative 20 years ago, and it's developing for different reasons, not for the same reasons. Okay, the Saudis want enough progress on peace to allow them to sign. The Jordanians and the Egyptians want the prevention of mass transfer. So, how far will it go? Again, is an open question, but I do think there is a Saudi, Jordanian, Egyptian alliance in the making. I agree.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of
Thank
Belgium.
you. Yes, Arnold Pauls, Ambassador of Belgium. A comment on Syria. We hear those like you, Doctor, that call for caution and speak about they want to see actions. I also hear those that say that that same caution can become a self-fulfilling prophecy and leading to failure and resumption of conflict. From what I hear is that the national dialogue, recently held national dialogue, while a lot of criticism can be raised, is all in all a very positive thing. It's 3 months, and I think quite a number of observers with an open mind would say, wow, hats off for a almost faultless trajectory in those 3 months, given the enormously difficult circumstances. A comment. A question on Lebanon and coming back to the summit. In the press here, it is perceived as the summit was an occasion for Lebanon to be, back in the Arab world. Was that perceived as such by others at the summit or in the Arab world? So the significance of the summit for Lebanon. Thank you.
But one before you answer, can I just add one more?
Thank you. My question is about Jordan. How will Jordan react, or how would it be able to accommodate if there is a transfer, and how will it be able to maintain, the monarchy, knowing that Israel wants to keep the Hashemite monarchy in Jordan, but how will that balance be achieved between, the transfer of millions, maybe pushing towards a republic, and maintaining the monarchy and the regime of the Hashemites?
Well, my question would have been: are we looking at a new Sykes-Picot? Are we living in the area of Benjamin Netanyahu keeps talking about a new order in the Middle East. Given everything we've seen so far, is that the order we're moving towards, or that he's pushing towards? Easy question.
That is a grand finale question. Ambassador, it's no doubt that the international community has to walk a very fine line between insisting that the Syrian regime does everything before it opens up, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, as you said, and between opening unconditionally and giving the Syrian regime that it has no problem with its potentially radical policies, particularly that you have 5,000-6,000 foreign nationals who are not Syrian, whose principal objective and interest is not Syria, but it's their, you know, jihadist ideology. And so what do you do? How do you do it? My suggestion is that you open up through a step-by-step approach. You don't ignore, you don't insist on total, rehabilitation first, because that doesn't work. But you also don't insist on, you don't engage in unconditional opening, because in my view, that doesn't work either. You agree on a plan, on a step-by-step plan. You do this, we do this. Frankly, the first test, in my view, is not the national dialogue, which was a gathering of 2 days. It did not come up with much. Is the government? The government is going to be announced in a couple of days. Is it going to be inclusive or not? Is it going to be a one-color government, or is it going to that, for example, is a fair test, I think, for things to move forward. I'm sorry.
On Lebanon.
On Lebanon, what was
the return of Lebanon to the international arena? Was it perceived as its participation in the?
I would say there is wide support in the Arab world for what is going on in Lebanon. I think again, I don't know if I have to choose my words carefully, but I think that people in the Arab world did not look at the domination of Hezbollah in Lebanon as a positive step. Hezbollah was looked at positively in the Arab world when it was seen as fighting Israel, but domestically it was not looked at positively, and people are relieved that the new government is offering hope, even if it is premature hope, even if it is just a feeling, but it's still important that it is giving people, not just in Lebanon, I don't want to talk on behalf of you, but throughout the Arab world, I think there is hope that at least it's a serious opening. It's not a solution yet, but it's a serious opening, whereas such an opening did not exist before. To the question about Jordan, look, Israel's aim today is to take over all of historic Palestine. What that does to other regimes is of less importance to them. It used to be important to them in the past, but with such an ideological Israeli government, things have changed. Remember, people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir 30 years ago, 20 years ago, were not heard of. They were at the very, very far fringe of Israeli politics. Today, they are right in the center of Israeli decision-making. And these people are calling the shots. They're not a majority yet, but without them, the Israeli government will fall. Israeli society, not just the government, in my view, has been steadily moving to the right in the last 30, 40 years. And in my view, not just steadily, but permanently. I am very pessimistic about a peace force developing in Israel, as we have seen, let's say, in the 90s, that would seriously push for a solution. Today, 85% of Israelis don't want a two-state solution. So the trend is very worrisome. Your question, are we seeing? Well, it depends on us, frankly.
Thank you.
It depends on us. If we leave Israel as a society, Israel today is talking about a federal Druze arrangement in Syria and maybe even in Lebanon. Okay, are the Druze going to accept this or not? Are we going to accept it or not? So it is not a fait accompli that everything Israel announces it wants to do is necessarily done. But in the end, are we up to the challenge or not is the real question.
On this note, I hope we will be up to the challenge. I want to thank you, Dr. Masher, for this very interesting and wide-ranging conversation. And I'd like to thank everybody who attended in person today. It's good to be back and back in Beirut. Thank you so much.
Thank you.